Hey, friends! Just so you know, we enjoy the swear word and we rely on good old fashioned humor to get through some seriously dark subject matter. At no time do we intend any disrespect toward the victims or families of the victims in the cases we cover. Also, be sure to listen to the end for a few palate cleansing bloopers to reset your mindset. And with that, we thank you for listening and we hope you enjoy.
Hey, friends. Welcome to Crime Will Tell. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Carrie.
As a true crime podcast and fans of true crime, I know I've kind of mentioned this before, but we see a lot of just repeated themes and motives in the cases that we cover or that we're reading about: jealousy, money, greed, revenge. And then there's these situations that really amplify all of these emotions and conflicts, things like affairs and secrets and custody disputes. This case highlights some of those factors and the damage that it brought to a family, and possibly the lengths that some people will go to keep a secret.
Oh, salacious.
Yeah, you better
I'm,
drink up,
I'm
Carrie.
in
What
it.
are
I'm here
you
for
what are you
this.
sipping on?
I am about ready to finish the second to last bottle of the Angel's Envy that I have in my cabinet de la cour. So, Angel's
Ah,
Envy for me.
it is real good.
Yeah, it's real good.
She real tasty. Okay.
What are you drinking?
I am continuing on my bottle of Driftless Glen bourbon.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Also pretty damn tasty. So, yeah, I enjoy it.
Excellent.
So, cheers to you, my friend.
Cheers, my friend. Clink.
Clink. This is episode 58 of Crime Will Tell. And on this episode, I'm going to be talking about the Redwine family from Colorado.
Like gulp, gulp, gulp. Red wine?
Yeah, not white wine, red wine.
Oh.
Mark and Elaine Redwine had two sons together, Corey and Dylan, and there really isn't a ton of information about their history together, but it's really not pertinent to the story. I'm just trying to kind of give a little background as to who these people are. Mark Redwine had been married previously and had two other children with his first wife, so he had four children. And Mark would often be gone for months at a time for his job, which I'm sure really put a strain on his and Elaine's relationship. And Mark also had a drinking problem and a temper, which I'm sure was part of the reason their marriage ended after 18 years together.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah. And this led to a very contentious divorce that lasted from 2005 to 2009. And not
Whoa.
surprising, it also included a very lengthy custody battle over their two sons, Corey and Dylan. Despite the boys' 8-year age gap, the brothers were incredibly close. Dylan looked up to his older brother, Corey. He was his confidant, the person that he went to for advice and support. These guys were tight. So Elaine met and began dating Mike Hall in October of 2009, which would have been the year that the divorce was finalized. And they actually ended up getting married in August of 2015. Mike was a very positive role model and supportive father figure for the boys, which I'm sure really added to Mark's animosity and bitterness throughout their divorce.
Um,
Mark had contested Elaine moving with their sons to Colorado Springs, which was about a 6-hour drive from where the family had been living. But she had been granted primary custody, and Mark got to keep their home in the Durango, Colorado area.
okay.
So he stayed where the family had been, and then she moved with the boys 6 hours away to the Colorado Springs area.
So she did move with the boys, even though he contested it.
Right. Yep. So
Got
she
it.
was granted full custody and given permission to leave the area. She and Mike ended up living together in the Colorado Springs area.
Got it. Okay.
Part of the court ordered custody agreement was for Dylan to spend his Thanksgiving break that year from school with his father in Vallecito, Colorado, which is still in the Durango area. Corey was 21 at this time, so as an adult, he no longer had to follow the custody agreements or spend any time with his parents at all if he didn't want to. But unfortunately for 13-year-old Dylan, he didn't have that option. He made it very clear that he wanted to stay and spend the holiday with his mom and her family. Part of the reason was that his grandmother, or his mom Elaine's mother, had been diagnosed with cancer, and he really wanted to spend the holiday with
Mm.
her. Not sure if it would be the last. And the other part was that he didn't want to be around his father.
Oh.
And we'll get into more of why that was later. Dylan was absolutely dreading this trip with his dad, Mark. So much so that his mother, Elaine, asked her attorney, Amber Harrison, if there was any way that they could contest the visit so that he could stay with her for the holiday. But since it was a court ordered visit, he unfortunately had to go. So Elaine, her boyfriend Mike, and his brother Corey all encouraged Dylan to try and make the most of the trip and maybe just focus on spending time with his friends while he was there. So, like I said, the family had lived in that area for years. So Dylan still had some really, really close friends in that area. So when he would go visit his dad, he still had some really great buddies there that he would spend a lot of time with. So that was a really good thing.
Yeah.
On November 18th of 2012, Dylan reluctantly got on a plane to go on this court-ordered visit with his father. Elaine and Dylan, they were, texting throughout his day of travel. She was checking in on him, just making sure that he was okay. I mean, he's a 13-year-old flying by
Yeah.
himself, so she was worried and just wanted to make sure everything was going
Yeah. It's her
smoothly.
baby.
Yeah, and she'd asked if he'd landed in Durango, and at 5:49 p.m., he texted her and said that, his plane had landed, and at 7:03, she had texted him again asking if his dad had picked him up from the airport, and he responded yes with a sad face emoji.
Oh.
Yeah, it makes me just so sad. And she told him, she was like, buddy, I miss you already, but just told him to try and have fun. But I'm sure her heart was just breaking that he was kind of stuck there, and I know she wanted him to be with her. So Mark's house, it was very secluded, and it was kind of in the mountains, and it's in an area called Vallecito. In certain documents, they refer to it as the Vallecito house, and I can't figure out if he had two homes, like the family home where they all lived and this house, which is why they
Oh.
refer to it as different, or if he had moved and was now in this Vallecito area. I couldn't figure it out, but I just kind of loosely refer to it as the Durango area a lot of
Okay.
times. But his house, the one where Dylan and him were going to be staying that week, was in Vallecito, which
Okay.
is kind of a more secluded area. There really wasn't much for Dylan to do while he was there. None of his friends were within walking distance, so he would, often be pretty bored just sitting around the house. Dylan was a typical teenage kid. He loved video games and sports, especially baseball, and of course, hanging out with his friends. He was attached to his freaking cell phone like every teenager,
Mm.
constantly texting, and he was very active on social media. He was a smart and funny kid who loved joking around and pranking his friends. Like they were always pranking each other, and he
I
just seemed
like
like he
that.
was kind of like an ornery kid, and I love that. He wasn't into fishing and didn't like to go out and wander around in the woods, so it was probably just pretty fucking boring for him to be at his dad's house. Another reason I'm sure he was dreading the trip a little bit.
Mm.
So before he left for the trip, he was already making plans with some of his buddies who were still in that area. So he was
Oh,
like,
okay.
"Yes, I get to, see some of my friends." So again, Mark picked Dylan up from the Durango La Plata County Airport on Sunday, November 18th. And according to Mark, he picked him up from the airport, and then they went to Walmart to pick up a few things for the week. They got some snacks, they bought some movies to watch, and then they picked up some dinner at McDonald's. before they made the 45-minute drive back to his house. When they arrived back at Mark's house around like 7:30 that night, they ended up watching a movie together. And then Mark said he, just went upstairs to bed, and Dylan was downstairs on the couch watching TV. The next day, which would be November 19th, Mark ended up texting Elaine at 4:32 p.m. while she was on her way home from work and told her that he couldn't find Dylan and asked if she knew where he was. He said that he'd been trying to get a hold of him all afternoon, but he wasn't getting a response. And she was like, I don't know where he is. Like, what do you mean he's missing? Like, what the fuck, man? And she's like, I haven't heard from him all day either. And just mama's instinct, she knew something was wrong. And she knew that Dylan wouldn't have just run away. She knew her son and that he would have called her to come get him. Like, if something had
Mhm.
happened before he just would have left on his own. And I realize that that's a very abrupt change. I will fill in all the blanks. She went from like, sending her baby off at the airport to go be with his dad. And then less than 24 hours later, she's getting a text that his dad is like, I don't know where our kid is. So just to kind of
It's
give you
insane.
a glimpse of just how quickly things turned. So Elaine, his mother Elaine, her boyfriend Mike, and their son Corey packed up and they drove the 6 hours to the Durango area to start searching for Dylan. They wasted no time trying to get to where he was so they could find him. That's stressful enough, but she's also got 6 hours to get there and, just sit there and stew and think and panic. So she's texting Mark, she's calling people, she's trying to figure out what to do. And she told Mark, she's like, you should call the police, let him know that he's missing. And he told her that he had gone to the Bayfield, Colorado marshal's office and had reported him missing. But Elaine had also called the marshal's office herself on the drive, and they told her that they hadn't received any calls about Dylan missing. So she was like, what the fuck? She texted Mark and was like, hey, Bayfield says that they haven't heard anything. What's up? And he didn't respond. So she's even more panicked, like, what the fuck is going on? And from the very beginning, Elaine made it very clear that she suspected Mark in Dylan's disappearance, that
Mm.
he just wasn't being honest about what had happened to him. While on their drive to the Durango area, she actually texted Mark and said he wouldn't just leave. He would have called me. I am so suspect of you right now. How could he just disappear? And he was like, look, I'm doing everything that I can to find our son. And was just kind of like, leave me alone, back off. So friends and family continued calling and texting Dylan, trying to just get him to let someone know that he was okay. But no one got a response from him. And again, for a kid who was attached to his phone, this was incredibly alarming.
Yeah.
So Mark did end up contacting local law enforcement, and an officer was dispatched to his home. I mean, he contacted them after Elaine called him out
Was
on it.
like, why didn't you contact them? Piece of shit.
And so an officer got there and was like, hey, we're going to start doing some searches. Are there any items that belong to Dylan that we can use for the scent dogs to go out and search through the woods for him? And Mark was like, no. The officer was like, well, did he stay here last night? And Mark's like, yeah. And he said, where did he sleep? And Mark pointed to the couch, and there was like blankets and a pillow on the couch from Dylan sleeping there. The officer was like,
Jeez.
well, can we take that pillowcase? And Mark was like, yes. And it stood out to the officer because it was just a weird exchange. Like most parents would be like, yeah,
Yeah.
this is
Take
his
anything.
shirt.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, Dylan had a bedroom there. So for Mark to immediately just say that there was like nothing there that belonged to
Oh,
him
wow.
was
Yeah.
was just weird. And so searches began pretty much immediately. First, by family and friends, because they still knew a lot of people in that area. So Elaine's contacting people, there's people out looking for him, and then by law enforcement and other volunteers. The Durango area is very mountainous and has a lot of steep canyons, and it just it makes it a very difficult and potentially dangerous place to search, especially at night. And so
Mm.
as it got later and later and later, they kind of had to, pull people out and start the next day again. So Elaine, Mike, and Corey made their journey to that area and they arrived around 2 o'clock in the morning, but they went directly to the marshal's office in Bayfield and were like, what are we doing? What do we need to do to find him? Like they were just doing everything that they could to
My
find
God, I can't
Dylan.
even imagine how she must have been feeling.
Yeah. So investigators spoke with Mark and he, just kind of outlined what happened that day. And he said that he got up that morning because he had some errands to run. And when he went to leave the house, Dylan was asleep on the couch in the living room. So he just kind of woke him up and was like, hey, bud, I'm leaving. I'll be back in a little bit, but call me if, once you're awake or if you need anything. And said that while he was out running his errands, he'd send him some text, while he was gone, but he never got a response from his son. When he returned to his house around 11:30 that morning, Dylan wasn't at the house. When I was like reading this, I'm like, who has their kids stay with them for a visit for a holiday and then chooses to spend hours running errands alone the morning after they get there? Like, get that shit done before your kid comes into town. Also, when Mark returned home and couldn't find Dylan, he took a nap. He didn't look for him. He just decided to go night night for a little bit. I mean, who takes a nap when they can't find their fucking kid?
How do we know this? Did he admit to that?
Yeah. He was like, I came home, Dylan wasn't here. I just assumed he went out. Went out where? Wandering the fuck around?
Can I play devil's advocate? I mean, they knew a lot of people in the area.
No one near where they were. Like somebody would have had to drive like 20 miles to get him.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
And then he had like texted him multiple times, didn't get a response. So yes, I mean it could have happened. Like he could have had somebody come pick him up and just was choosing to not respond to his dad. But at that point he likely would have contacted Elaine or somebody and been like, I'm at so and so's house, please come get me. I can't stay here anymore. Whatever the situation might have been. And also, I'm assuming that the cell reception probably wasn't top notch in
Mm,
the middle of the fucking woods. So there's probably a little room for like not getting a response, but not all day.
understood. Yeah.
Anyway, so he told him, he was like, Dylan must have run away. And he denied having any involvement in his disappearance. And so I just wanted to reiterate just real quick that when Elaine and Mike learned that Dylan was missing, they immediately got in the car and began contacting law enforcement in the Durango area. And Mark took a fucking nap. So his mom was like, my son is missing. I'm scared. I have to get there and find him. And his dad was like, my son is missing. I'm real sleepy.
Really need to sleep this off.
Gotta rest these bones.
I mean, who am I to judge someone in the face of conflict and adversity? I mean, people respond differently, but that just seems very odd.
Yeah. And I think it would have been different if Dylan was the type of kid that would just go fishing by himself and be gone for a few hours or
Mm,
like to go hunt for mushrooms or whatever and was like an outdoorsy kid, but he
mhm.
wasn't. So for Mark to just be like, "Hmm, I don't know. Like it wasn't in his character. He had nowhere to go, had no way to get somewhere.
Huh.
So then, of course, investigators are trying to, just kind of take his timeline and confirm Mark's account of everything that had happened. And they did find footage from the Walmart to confirm that they did go there, which, just real quick, kudos to Walmart and their stellar surveillance because even in the cases that we've covered, I feel like we mention Walmart surveillance so many times. It's like they're rolling back prices and solving crimes. It's amazing.
That's Jerry, plain as day, buying the hacksaw.
Fucking Jerry. All right. So Elaine had sent Dylan text messages at just after 10 o'clock the night that he arrived at Mark's and one at 12:07 the following afternoon, but she hadn't gotten a response to either of those. And actually, all of his text messages had abruptly stopped that first night, as well as all of his activity on social media. And this was really rare, for a teenager who was always on his phone and always quick to respond to texts. And it was said that if he didn't have to be up early for school, so like in the summers or on vacations, he would stay up super late watching
Mm.
TV, playing video games, browsing social media, like just typical teenager
Oh
shit. We all
yeah.
did it. You'd sleep
Uh,
until noon or 2
yep.
or whatever and then stay up all fucking night. When everything kind of abruptly stopped as far as messages and stuff, it was kind of like, ugh, okay, that's weird for him. So investigators spoke with Dylan's close friend, Ryan Nava, who lived in that area, but his house was like 20 miles from where Mark lived. And he and Dylan were super close. They spoke pretty much every single day. They spent time together when Dylan would visit, and they had been making plans for this trip before Dylan even left Elaine's
Hmm.
house. So while Dylan was on his journey to Durango, he had been texting with his friend Ryan, and he asked if he could spend the night with him that night. Like that, he was like, "When I get to my
Oh,
dad's, can I please spend the night with you?"
he's doing everything he could to just avoid.
Yeah, just be away. Yeah. And so Ryan had
Oh.
asked his mom, like, "Hey, can Dylan spend the night tonight?" And she said no. So Ryan then asked his grandmother if Dylan could stay at her house. And she said yes, which gotta fucking love grandmas. If mom says no, ask Granny. And she was
Oh
like,
my
"Yeah, sure.
gosh.
I
Yeah.
love that kid. Have him over." And so, he was like, "Yeah, so my grandma said you can stay tonight. No big deal. I'll see you over there." But when Dylan's plane landed, he texted Ryan saying that he wasn't going to be able to because Mark had told him no, which I
Mm.
understand.
Of
Like, dude,
course.
it's your
Yes.
first night. Like, just let's get settled in.
Yep.
Maybe you can see him tomorrow, whatever. But this also speaks volumes about how badly Dylan did not want to be around Mark, that he was, making plans to stay somewhere else before he even got there. It just
Hmm.
makes me really, really sad. Anyway, so they continued texting that night and they made plans to meet up early that following morning. Like they were going to meet at 6:30, which wasn't a super rare thing apparently. Like they like to get
Oh,
up early and like spend the full day together.
okay.
But Dylan was like, he was texting his friend and he was like, "Dude, you better let me in at 6:30 or I will call your ass all day long if you don't." Like he was just like, "I'm going to be there first thing in the morning. You better let me in." And so Ryan was like, "Dude, I will be there. I will open the sliding glass door so you can come in." He set an alarm for the next morning at 6:30. He got up, he opened the door, but Dylan never showed up.
Oh,
This was strange because the night before he had been so adamant about Ryan making sure he
making
opened the
sure.
door. And so Ryan texted him at 6:46 that morning. I was like, "Dude, where are you at?" But he never got a response to calls or texts that he sent to Dylan throughout that day. Investigators, looked through Mark's home. They did end up finding small amounts of Dylan's blood in Mark's living room. There was some
Hmm.
on a coffee table, the floor, the couch, and a love seat, which initially wasn't a huge red flag because it was such small amounts. With a kid, it could have been from a skin knee or a bloody nose or, something from another visit that Dylan had been there. So it's not uncommon for a kid, to leave traces of blood in a house that they spend decent
Hmm.
amount of time in. Like it's just it wasn't like pools of blood or trails, or it was just like little tiny bits of blood. And Mark told investigators that Dylan had a cold sore on his mouth that had been bleeding, but that wasn't supported by anyone else that saw Dylan that day. He had seen his mom, his friends, people at the airline. Nobody could say that he had a fucking bloody cold sore on his mouth, and they don't drip blood.
Don't they like ooze and pus more than bleed?
Yeah, and Mark also said that while they were watching their movie that night, that they were tossing a Nerf football around, and that maybe it hit him in the face and caused him to bleed. I doubt it, Mark. It's a fucking Nerf football.
A bleeding cold sore seems oddly specific thing to lie about.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
so
I don't know
weird.
if he was just yeah, I don't know why, but they were just kind of like, okay." But he was, like, trying to come up with reasons why they might have found blood, but
Hmm.
there didn't seem to be one. A cadaver sniffing dog was brought to the home and alerted to the smell of human remains on some of Mark's clothing, in the back of his pickup, and throughout the home. The dogs alerted to the smell of death in the living room, the laundry room, and the kitchen. At some point, Mark agreed to take a polygraph test, which he failed miserably. And of course, this just kept him right on investigators' radars. They're like,
Yeah.
something is just off with this guy. There were tons of searches for Dylan. And in all of the time that they were doing these searches, Mark only participated in one. Like just one search for his missing son. So he didn't want to look for his kid, but he sure as shit didn't mind getting in front of cameras for interviews. He tried to make it seem like he and Dylan were just real tight and super close and loved spending time together, just the two of them, a couple of bros while he was visiting. Like he might as well have just been holding like a dad of the fucking year trophy that he bought himself while he was doing these interviews. And in a move that I don't fully understand, Elaine, Mark, and Corey Redwine all went on the Dr. Phil show in 2013. Now, if you're not familiar with Dr. Phil, he's this real goofy kind of southern guy it's like a psychiatrist talk show that there's always a lot of drama
It's
and theatrics,
salacious.
and
Yeah. Salacious
it's
daytime
ridiculous.
TV. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I know that Elaine wanted to do it to bring attention to Dylan's disappearance and, just the ongoing case. But the show is just, like I said, always filled with drama and theatrics. And Dr. Phil just gives me the willies anyway. But there was a lot of nationally televised finger pointing happening. Elaine and Corey thought that Mark had hurt Dylan and was lying to everyone. And then Mark continued trying to paint himself as a victim, and he was referring to his son Corey as a pawn in Elaine's game to hurt him. Like he was using Dylan's disappearance to somehow hurt him. Like it just didn't make any fucking sense what he was talking
Yeah.
about. And he just presented it like his adult son wasn't capable of forming his own opinions and making his own decisions. That it was just strange to watch. So Mark continued to blame Elaine for the strained relationships with his sons and, saying that she was pitting them against him. And it's pretty clear that Mark is someone who can't take responsibility for his own
Mm,
actions. Everything is always someone else's fault. And it was
mm,
just becoming more and more clear all the time.
mhm,
So the family was actually on 2 episodes of the show. And so on the first one, Dr. Phil asked Mark if he would take a polygraph test to help confirm, whether or not he was being truthful. He's like, "Here's your chance to set the record straight since you failed the first one given to you by police. Like I'll give you one, and you if you're telling the truth, prove it." And so Mark agreed. He was like, "Yeah, I'll take one," and agreed to take a polygraph the next day. But he ended up backing out of taking it, stating that he had been drinking the night before and he just didn't know if that would impact the results. It's like he has a drinking problem. Of course, he was drinking, but he was like, "I don't know if that's going to affect anything." And so he backed out using that as his excuse. And Dr. Phil was not very happy with Mark on the episode and just called him on his bullshittery. He was like, "Dude, I gave you the opportunity. Now it just seems like you're lying, man." So it's just more drama.
mm.
They wanted to get attention, and it helped. Like a lot of tips ended up coming into investigators following the Dr. Phil show, but nothing came from any of them. Like there
Mm.
were no viable leads. And so it brought attention to Dylan's case, but just added more tension between the family. So Mark was interviewed tons of times by the police throughout the investigation, and he loved hearing himself talk. So he would happily sit with them and just run his fucking mouth. He continued to go in for interviews, even when investigators told him that they they knew that he knew where Dylan was and that they just wanted to find him. They were just like, "We know that you know where he is." And he was just like, I didn't. He would just sit there and talk to him and fucking just kept setting himself up for it. It was very
That's
strange.
yeah,
And
especially a behavior from a parent whose child is missing.
yeah,
He's
and
not
he would just sit
displaying any,
there.
like, sense of urgency or fear or
Yeah, it would be like, I think Elaine is hiding him and trying to get back at me and is trying to put, like, she just had him hidden away somewhere
okay.
and wanted to make it seem like Mark, it just, none of it made any sense. It was really stupid. And in several of the interviews, which a lot of them you can listen to or see on YouTube or whatever, he appears to be very intoxicated. His speech is slurred, and like I said, he's just rambling and a little incoherent, but you can just tell
Mm,
he's probably drunk when he's talking to these
mm.
investigators. He just continued to deny any involvement in Dylan's disappearance and would point the finger at Elaine. So
S
everybody's blaming everybody else. In one drunken interview, he made it very clear that he doesn't care for women. He said, quote, "Sexual needs are about all a woman can do for me. I don't want to hear their mouth. I don't want to hear their shit. I don't want to hear their nagging. I don't want to hear none of that crap." And I guess that's part of the misogynist in me, that I have no problem being on my own without the company. He's just a very open about his misogyny and how he feels about women.
Okay.
And he just went on to complain about having to listen to Elaine's shit for 18 years, and that she's the reason that the relationships with his son had grown so distant. Neato, you asshole.
Sounds emotionally mature.
Yeah. And if that's not enough to make you dislike the guy, he also says the word frustrated multiple times in interviews, which is incredibly annoying.
That's frustrating.
It frustrates the clap out of me. Yeah. And it's especially annoying for a guy who thinks he is smarter than everyone else. And then when he says dumb shit like that, I'm like, you.
Is this guy a
He,
narcissist?
yes, big time. He
Oh
probably says
my god.
supposedly too. At some point, it was revealed that a big cause of the distance between Mark and his youngest sons was due to a disturbing discovery made by the boys while they were on a trip with their father in 2011. So this would have been the year before Dylan went missing. So Corey, Mark, and Dylan had been taking trips. They were going to different NASCAR races and visiting different Major League Baseball stadiums, which is pretty cool. Like, that's a
Yeah.
cool father son thing to do. On one of those trips, I don't know exactly where they were, but the three of them, were staying in a hotel. Mark had gone to sleep and he was letting Dylan use his laptop to just kind of play around on the internet. Corey had stepped outside of the hotel because he was wanted to call his girlfriend and check in with her. So Dylan's in the room by himself on this laptop. And when Corey walked back in the room, a horrified Dylan pulled his older brother into the bathroom and he was like, "I have to show you something." And so while he was using their father's laptop, Dylan had discovered some sorted photos that were not meant for him or likely anyone else to see. There were some selfies of Mark wearing women's underwear, which is not a huge deal. Whatever floats your boat. I'm sure it would have been shocking to find, photos of your father in women's underwear. But the really disturbing photos were of Mark wearing a diaper and, icky trigger warning, eating poop out of the diaper.
I'm sorry. There were selfies of him wearing a diaper and
And then
him
eating shit out of, like, shit around his mouth, on his face. Yes, exactly.
his own shit, or did he procure
I
this
don't
shit from
know. It
someplace
it did
else?
it was
Dog
never
shit?
it was never specified what sort of poop it was, but as far as I know, he never argued that it was feces. I'm assuming it was probably his own, but I do not know.
Look, i- I'm it is not my vibe to consume feces.
Hmm.
If I can avoid that, I will till the end of my time.
Yeah.
But there are taboo things, or what mainstream society views as taboo. I don't give a flying fuck what you do. Like, if he likes to wear diapers and eat shit out of diapers, cool, cool, cool. Like, whatever, live your best life. It's not something I would do, but I'm not going to judge him for doing that. I don't give a shit. It doesn't hurt anyone. However, the issue here is Dylan probably went snooping around in his father's laptop like he wasn't supposed to and found these photos, which would have been highly shocking. That's what's at stake here. Is Dylan's like, I did not know this about my dad. Yeah.
I know that there are tons of fetishes out there. I have never
Have
wanted
at
someone to
it.
pee on me, but if you want someone to pee on you, go for it. Whatever makes you
Mm-hmm.
happy. I do think that eating poop is incredibly disgusting. I can't even say eating poop without wanting to gag.
I'm with you. I can't. I mean, let's be real. Like, as humans, we're designed to, we don't like the smell of shit. I've never tasted
Yeah.
it, so I can't say that it tastes good or bad, but based on the way it smells, I can surmise and deduce that probably tastes like shit. So I'm not going to
Right.
eat it.
And it can make you very sick too. It's also just a very dangerous thing to do.
That's the thing. Like, if you have a thing where that's your thing, well, then do your thing, but just know that your thing could make you sick.
Yeah. If I was like, you know what turns me on? Raw chicken. And I mean, Mark doesn't seem like he was probably a real tech savvy guy that it could have been right in his fucking photos on the desktop. Who
Oh
knows?
my
Like it,
God, it could have been on the desktop itself. So maybe Dylan didn't go looking for it.
yeah, I don't know. But, or maybe he went to save something and find it and was like, oh, what are these? Who knows how he came across them?
I don't
But
know, but that's jarring for sure.
yeah. And I think, just whenever you kind of looked up to somebody and then you're seeing them in a diaper eating poop, you're like, what in the that's my dad. Like if I found photos of my dad eating shit, it would throw me off and I
That's
certainly wouldn't
fair.
be sharing a drink with him. You know what I mean?
That's fair.
And when you're 13, you really don't have that capacity yet
You
to be like, you
don't.
know what? To each his own. You're just kind of like, my dad.
So Dylan was like, if I have to have these seared in my eyeballs, Corey, you also need to have these seared. Look what I found. Can you believe this?
The discovery of these photos was devastating to Dylan and, of course,
Yeah.
created like a further rift in the already fractured relationship that they had with their dad. And so while they had these pictures up on the laptop in the bathroom, Corey took pictures
Of
of
the
basically
pictures?
yeah, so he had them on his phone. And the brothers had really mostly kept their father's secret fetishes to themselves. Dylan had mentioned them to his mother, Elaine's attorney,
Oh boy.
when he was telling her that he didn't want to spend any time with his father, like during more of like the custody portion
Mm-hmm.
of the, settlement and whatever. I think he was just like, I don't know that he gave her specifics, but I think he was just like, look, I saw some disturbing pictures of my dad and I really just don't want to be around him. So I don't think he told her what was happening. And I mean, I don't know that it would have changed anything if they knew what was in them. If it was a picture of him with a young boy or him hurting people or whatever, that would be different. But if it's just him by himself
Living his best
doing gross
life.
shit,
Yeah.
whatever. So during a search in June of 2013, so this would have been like the summer after he went missing,
Okay.
some of Dylan's remains were located
Oh.
near an ATV trail on Middle Mountain Road, which was about 10 miles from Mark's home. They found just kind of some scattered bones, portions of his clothing, which included a shredded Chicago White Sox t shirt, a Fila sock, one Nike Air Jordan shoe, and some earbuds in a very secluded area in the mountains where his body had been dumped. Elaine did confirm that these items were Dylan's, and this was just, it was not an easy area to get to, and certainly not a spot that a runaway 13-year-old would have stumbled upon. It was pretty clear to investigators that someone placed Dylan's body there in hopes, that it would never be found and where the remains would likely be scattered by animals. So, when investigators informed Mark that they had found some of Dylan's remains, there's footage of it. He was really upset. He was crying. It also didn't take long for him to start coming up with theories about what might have happened. Like he told them that there was a registered sex offender that he had found out was at a house near his home the day Dylan went missing. It was like he was just throwing blame spaghetti at the wall, but nothing was sticking. Like he was just trying to like give investigators other places to look, and it just, none of it was working. 2 years later, Dylan's skull was found by a couple hiking in, so this was 2015, and this was an area that was like a mile and a half from where the rest of the remains were found.
Whoa.
So again, is like they're just doing these constant interviews with Mark, and even when investigators told him that the prosecution was building a case against him to take to a grand jury, he never asked for an attorney, and he would end up just sitting and talking to them forever and would just, deny that he ever hurt Dylan, but he, for whatever reason, would just sit there and just talk to them over and over. And the detectives working this case had to be so frustrated with him. Like, I can't imagine working a case knowing someone probably committed a crime, but just not having the evidence that you need to prove it. And just like
Very frustrating.
super frustrating. Just hoping that like that one time that you talk to them, you're going to get them to just go, fine, the rest of him is here, or, just give some peace. But it just never happened. But Mark Redwine was finally arrested on July 22nd of 2017, so 5 years after Dylan went missing, in Bellingham, Washington, where he was working as a long haul trucker, and so he was on a run out in Washington, and he was arrested on a warrant. And this arrest came after a grand jury indictment in July of 2017, which accused him of second-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death. He faced up to 48 years in prison if he was found guilty on the charges. So his days of playing the victim and, turning on the sunshine for reporters, investigators, and running his drunk mouth were done. And it's kind of like Chris Watts or any of these cases. Like, it's so gross to me when the person who committed a crime gets in front of cameras and begs for their loved one to come home safely, knowing full well what happened to them and where they are. And so, like you asked earlier, yes, he is a fucking narcissist, without a doubt. So there were several delays anyway, and then they just extended because at the time they were kind of like balls deep in the COVID pandemic. So it was like there were delays up to it, and then once COVID
Mm-hmm.
hit, it just added further delays. Mark Redwine did not testify during his trial, but his defense attorneys pushed for the argument that Dylan simply just ran away from home and was likely killed by an animal. And they stuck to this theory, even though his wallet and his backpack were never found with his remains and have never been found to this day. So, who runs away without taking their belongings with them? The defense also called the use of the cadaver dogs by investigators as junk science. They were like, that's bullshit. And they insisted that Mark had nothing to do with his son's murder. And I mean, of course, this was a circumstantial case. So the defense was just really pushing for reasonable doubt. It could have maybe possibly been this instead of this turd bag killing his son. Then on the other side, the prosecution really focused on the photos that Dylan and Corey had found of their father, as well as the strained relationship that Mark had with his sons. Dylan dreading the time, and him being forced to spend time with his father. All of these factors, they said, likely led to an argument that just spiraled out of control. They speculated that Mark got angry and, just panicked when the topic of the photos came up and ended up beating and killing Dylan was their theory. Also, the bulk of Dylan's remains, like during that first search where they were found, was off of an ATV trail. Mark had an ATV and was
Mm.
apparently very familiar with that area.
I
So that
was
was
going
just
to
another
ask,
like,
yeah, if he was familiar with the terrain and yeah.
yeah, yeah. So this was kind of his stomping grounds. And they were like, hmm.
Mm.
So, a forensic anthropologist testified during the trial that there were some small teeth marks on the bones that indicated the animals had ravaged the remains, which is not surprising. However, after they examined Dylan's skull, there was a fracture above his left eye, as well as two marks that on his skull that were likely caused by a knife or some sort of sharp tool, either at or close to the time of his death.
Mm.
And these injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma and sharp force injuries, not due to any sort of animal, like
Mm.
Mark and his attorneys speculated. So he wasn't killed by a bear or a mountain lion. They don't scatter bones miles away from each other, but a human who wants to conceal evidence of a crime sure does. They also brought a wildlife expert, and they testified that the different locations of the remains just didn't match the patterns of animals. They wouldn't have had, the body in one location and just dragged the skull a mile and a half away. They don't operate in that large of an area, and it's just not something that they would typically do. And bears were already hibernating at that point in the year. And so the expert testified that the remains were most likely moved by a human and not by an animal, which means that Mark took Dylan's head, he beheaded him,
That's what I
and
thought
moved
you
the
were
skull.
getting at.
Yeah.
So he fucking cut his son's head off.
Yeah. And put it in a different location,
That's
hoping that,
atrocious.
yeah. And God only knows what happened to all of Dylan, his backpack, his iPad, his iPod, his phone, like all the
Do
stuff that he
you
brought with him, his clothes.
So you said that the police speculate that an argument ensued that led to physical violence that resulted in Dylan's death.
Hmm.
Were there any theories out there, or did the police investigate the thread of thinking of like that it was premeditated, that this was in the court order, this visit, and that
No,
Mark
I
was
don't think so.
intending? Okay, so
No, I think it was assumed that it was not intentional.
oh, okay.
It just seemed like some sort of argument just escalated, and he
Mm,
accidentally killed him,
okay.
which is why he was charged with second-degree murder. So Mark's first wife also ended up testifying during the trial. So again, he was married before, had two children with her, and she had contacted investigators the week that Dylan went missing, and she told them, she was like, "Look, I feel like my ex-husband Mark had something to do with his disappearance." So she testified, and she stated during the trial that while they were on a camping trip in the late 80s, so this was, she had taken this trip with her then husband Mark, that he had said some really disturbing shit to her. When they arrived at their campsite, she said that he was standing there, like looking around. They were kind of just in the secluded part in the mountains. And he told her, like, you know what? This would be a really great place to get rid of a body. He said, if I ever needed to get rid of someone, he's like, I'd take them to the mountains and just let the wild animals take care of the body. Yikes, right?
It was like the worst kind of foreshadowing ever.
Exactly. And so the defense was like, this was like 30 years ago. How do you even remember that? And she was like, because this was my husband saying that and it creeped me out. And she was like, it always stuck with me. Like it just, oh, like she's like, it's just something that creeped me out and I never forgot it. And I'm only assuming this, but it probably felt like a little bit of a threat to her. Like, hey,
Absolutely.
if you ever fuck with me, guess what I'm going to do with you. And I'm sure that that made it like further implant, into her memories. There was also a searcher who had been out looking for Dylan who testified, and he was actually searching the area right around Mark's home with his search dog the night that Dylan went missing. Their search area was set up right across from Mark's house. And he testified that he remembered seeing the porch light and the lights inside Mark's home go off at 11 o'clock that night. So, Mark, like I said, lives in a very secluded area. There's no street lights, it's dark as shit. And the searcher thought it was really strange that someone who knew their child might be missing near their home would turn off their porch lights. The one thing that could possibly serve as some sort of beacon in the darkness. And that it looked like he just went to bed. He wasn't assisting in searches, he wasn't waiting up to see if Dylan came home. To me, that's the action of someone who knew Dylan wasn't coming home.
Isn't that baffling though? Like if Mark was responsible for Dylan's death, don't you think that the best way to cover his tracks is to be part of the search crews?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like you're out there like, I gotta find him. Where's my boy?
Yeah.
Not like, well, not everybody. Good luck finding my kid out there. I would be out there like, I'm gonna be here in case he comes home. If you guys need anything, just come inside. I will be in the living room. I'm not gonna be able to sleep. Like, how could you fucking sleep?
You can't. If you're truly worried about the welfare of a kid, you can't. You can't.
So Corey Redwine testified during the trial that he and Dylan had, found their dad's secret stash of photos a year before Dylan went missing. Like I said, he, had those photos on his phone. And in August of 2012, Corey had actually texted, I don't know what caused this, but he'd texted the photos to his dad, Mark, and confronted him about those photos. So during that exchange, Corey called Mark like a shit eating coward and told him, like, you are what you eat. And in response, Mark called his son a thief for stealing the photos from his computer and said that he was trying to hurt him just like his mother. And so there
Mm.
was obviously a lot of animosity towards Elaine, his ex wife, and especially since the kids preferred being with her. Corey also testified that Dylan was, just absolutely horrified by these photos that they found of their father, and that Dylan had lost any reason for him to look up to Mark that day.
Mm.
In August of 2012, on a trip to Boston, Dylan was on a trip with Mark, and he'd sent his brother a text that said, "Hey, send me those poop pics of Papa because he gave me a speech about you guys being a bad example, and I want to show him who really is." So
Oh.
obviously, Mark was talking to his son about his mom and his older brother being bad
Mm-hmm.
examples. And he's like, you know what? Fuck him. I'm going to show him. But respect for Corey in the sense he didn't want to involve his brother in a conflict. So he did not send the photos to
Mm.
Dylan. So even though he had requested the photos from his brother numerous times, Dylan was never in possession of them.
Mm.
And I don't know that he ever mentioned it to Mark. So,
Mm.
in reference to Dylan's final trip with his father, Corey stated in a 2017 People article, quote, Dylan was getting old enough to speak his mind. We encouraged him to. We encouraged him to tell him how he felt. You should always be able to tell your dad how you feel and have some sort of understanding. He was definitely going down there with a bigger voice than he had before. And so, after a 5-week trial, Mark Redwine was found guilty on July 16th, 2021. So,
Mm.
almost 10 years after Dylan was killed, by a unanimous jury on charges of second-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death. When the verdict was read, he just kind of stood there with his hands clasped in front of him. He didn't show any sort of emotion or reaction. He was just kind of like, whatever.
Mm.
Mark's sons, Corey and Brandon, Brandon was one of his older sons from his previous marriage. They both gave victim impact statements at the sentencing hearing, and both of them referred to their father as Mark or Mr. Redwine or the defendant. They wanted nothing to do with him.
Mm.
In October of 2021, Mark was sentenced to the maximum of 48 years in prison with
Good.
5 years of parole following his release. So, unless he's magic, he will be in prison the remainder of his life.
Good.
Like, so many articles about this case focused on the fetish photos of Mark. And on one hand, I get it, that it's a part of the story to get views, like gross and
Yeah.
shocking stuff gets clicks. And as humans, we're suckers for shock value. But the photos might not have had anything to do with Dylan's murder. So this is just me speculating, but here's what I think happened.
Ooh, okay, let's get into it. I'm here for it.
Dylan was the last person in Mark's family who had anything to do with him. Granted, their time together was forced by the courts, but Mark was hanging on to that relationship for dear life. And I don't think he really cared about spending time with his son. He just liked that the time with him was time away from Elaine, sort of a way to get back at her, because I'm sure that she hated being away from her son. They were incredibly close. Dylan didn't want to be there, and I'm sure that was painfully obvious to Mark. And I'm assuming that as the time went on, his frustration grew as he watched his son be distant with him, but continuously text with Elaine and his
Mm.
other friends, the people that he actually wanted to spend time with,
Mhm.
especially like for months. Even when Mark would text him, he wouldn't respond. Like, so Dylan hadn't been talking to his dad. Like, he would end up
Interesting.
having to text Elaine and be like, "Hey, I texted Dylan, but he hasn't gotten back to me." So I'm sure him sitting there texting his friends and his mom with no gap in time, no delay, he was like, "This motherfucker." So I believe that a heated conversation happened, something escalated. Maybe Dylan brought up the poop pics and told his dad how he felt about him. Maybe they were never mentioned, but something happened. And I think either Mark pushed him and he hit his head, maybe on the coffee table, or he struck him with some sort of sharp object, but he ended up killing Dylan. I don't think that he meant to kill his son, but he did. And instead of calling for help, he panicked and took his body to the mountains where he hoped it would never be discovered, and removed his son's head and took it to a different location so that if the other remains were found, it couldn't be identified. Then he went on some bullshit errands to his lawyer's office because he didn't have a scheduled appointment that day.
Mm.
And he went to Walmart to build an alibi and to kill time. He stalled as long as he could before contacting Elaine, and then he lied for fucking years. I think that Mark saw Dylan as something that belonged to him, that he had ownership of, but didn't truly care about. And he didn't want to lose control over him. And when he realized that he completely lost control of everything. Unless Mark confesses, we won't know what happened that night. So, regardless of whatever weird shit Mark was into, this case isn't about that. And it made me crazy seeing so many articles just being like, shit eating dad, get da, 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 da. It's like,
That had nothing to do with it.
this case is about a 13-year-old boy who lost his life at the hands of his father, one of the people in his life who was supposed to protect him from any harm or danger. And so, whatever events led to an altercation that night don't matter. Dylan isn't here anymore.
Mm.
That's what fucking
Mm.
matters. And the animosity and the resentment that Mark had toward his ex wife, and possibly him wanting to keep his sexual fetishes a secret, I don't know. His selfishness and his anger caused him to end his son's life and then hide it and lie and waste resources and hurt the people who truly loved and cared about Dylan.
That's the thing with narcissists. They don't know how to love. They don't have the capacity to love anyone but themselves. And so, I don't know. Mark had to, I struggle because I feel like Mark had to have had that in him in order to cross that line to take
Yeah.
someone's life, let alone his own youngest son's life. But then also, like, I don't know when the decapitation took place, but can you, I just, being a parent and the logistics of that is something that I can't.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine taking my son's head to the mountains and just having to think about, like, where do I put his backpack that it will never be found? Where do I take all of his stuff so that no one ever finds, like, just
He just disappeared him.
it's yeah, and it's just so horrifying and sad and gross, and then
Poor
there's these people
Dylan.
that actually just fucking adored being around him. He had so many friends. Like he had tons of friends that testified that, like, I didn't go into, like, I could have gone on for, I already did go on forever, but I could have gone on forever. And it just, like, they all just adored him. He had so many close friends, and he was gone for a week with his dad. And, like, before he left the Colorado Springs area, like, he went to go say goodbye to his friends. Like, there's photos of him with his
Aw.
buddies that he went to go say goodbye to, and he's wearing the shirt they found
I
in the woods.
wonder,
And
do you think that he had some kind of sixth sense that something bad was going to happen?
maybe.
I mean, he went around and said goodbye to his friends. He did everything he could to try to get out of going. He even tried to like prevent sleeping at his dad's house the first night. Like,
I mean, I don't know if something happened, that maybe he was threatened, like, on a trip or something, or maybe he just found his voice and he was like, felt like he was old enough to stand up a little bit and be like, this isn't what I
maybe,
want. And he
maybe.
just was at that age that you're big, but not big enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel really sorry for Elaine, Mike, and Corey.
Yeah, she testified. She gave the victim impacts. Like, to just have to stand there and look at your ex-husband.
The father of your child that then took the life of your child.
Yeah.
And then think about Corey. His dad killed his brother. Holding space for that, for Dylan's memory, I guess. I don't know. It sits heavy, you know?
Yeah. This one, I don't know. Like you said, just kind of sat. Yeah. It's like a big
It
just
sits like a
rock
brick.
on me. Yeah.
Yeah. The weight on this one is notable.
So with that, goodbye, Carrie.
Goodbye, James.
Ah, hey, friend. Ah,
Like, I am a puss pants.
keep doing what you're doing, sweaty face.
That's awesome.
You did it. You really did it.
But when I bitch about it, nobody listens to me.
Suck it up, whiny tits.
Wait, Dad.
Fucking might as well.
I think this is really cool.